Welcome back to another episode of the HIP podcast. My name is James Leighton, CEO and founder of Andersen James. This is the podcast where I bring you real life stories of some of the most interesting and inspirational leaders of our sector. Today, I was delighted to be joined by Colette McKune, Group Chief Executive of ForViva. We discussed lots and lots of topic on this episode. We started with the homelessness crisis and what more we can do in the Northwest to solve it. We look at the decarbonisation and net zero carbon. And we also look at ForViva's development plans over the next few years. I hope you enjoy the episode and get lots of value from it. And if you do like the episode, I'd ask that you like and subscribe.
Collette, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Delighted to be here, James.
How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, good. Busy as always, but yeah, good. Yeah, just met the customer committee, our new customer committee, which is very exciting, which, you know, I'm sure we'll talk about at some point.
Amazing. I mean, I've done you an introduction. I never quite do it justice. So just for the benefit of the listeners, just give us an introduction to yourself and a bit of a potted history of sort of your career to date.
Whoa.
Biggie to start with.
Yeah, okay, biggie to start with. Not that exciting, actually. Group Chief Executive of ForViva, which effectively means I lead an organisation that has as subsidiaries a registered social provider for housing, and also has a national property service company, which is Liberty, which means some days I'm a bit schizophrenic because I run a social housing organisation and then run a contracting business, and there are some synergies between the two and benefits, but also there's some things that just butt against each other. So that's always challenging. How did I end up in this role? I was asked a question a few weeks ago, why did you want to go into housing? And I suppose my honest answer to that, it was never a direction of travel. It was never something I wanted to do. I suppose I just floated in to where I am. I suppose, how did I get here? Brought up in social housing in Liverpool, in the Norris Green area of Liverpool. Large family, so understand the benefits of social housing. Was the only one who went to university, the only one went through further education. Know how important social housing is, know how important it is to have that stable home, because of that stable home I was healthy. Because of that stable home I was able to go into education, and successful in my education, drifted into retail, teaching, taught accountancy for a while, went to live in Australia.
Wow.
For a couple of years, which was interesting, and worked in property in Australia. Came back for what was going to be a holiday, but unfortunately it didn't work out. I ended up going back because there were some health issues at home with the family, and I ended up applying for a job in Merseyside Police as the force financial analyst, which was a brand new civilian role, which was investigating money laundering. And because I had a background in accountancy, I thought that'd be a great job to go for.
Amazing.
And I got it. I beat all of these coppers, ex-superintendents who were applying for it and whatever. And suddenly, I'm in my early 30s and I'm in Merseyside Police as the force financial analyst, and worked on some real interesting cases. And it was a great time in which I learned a lot. But after 12 years, there was nowhere for me to go because I was never going to be a copper. And I'd reached as high as I was going to reach as a civilian. And I'd done all the really interesting stuff and wanted to do more. And that's when I really had my first venture into housing, because I went to work as head of internal audit for a national supported housing organisation, and promoted through the ranks there. So had a stint as group director of corporate resources over HR and legal and governance. I was all things governance in that organisation. And again, but it was predominantly in London, and I was in London an awful lot. And my daughter was growing up, and when she got to sort of 5, needed me home more. Yeah. So made the decision to come back into the Northwest, and ended up working at Fusion 21, which was the consortium of housing providers that came to face some of the challenges that aren't dissimilar to the challenges we are facing now around decarbonisation. Yeah, and then from there went to City West Housing and Director of Asset Management, and City West, grew and has become For Housing, which ultimately is ForViva now. So being here 12 years, delivered the regeneration program, being responsible for developing around 1,500 new homes. We've built PRS, we've got people into employment, into jobs, and hopefully provide great customer service to our tenants. We don't get it right all the time, but we learn from our mistakes.
Amazing. What a great overview. I feel like there's so much to unpack. I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, there's so many stories in all of those.
I bet, yeah.
And I've managed to keep it all clean so far.
Yeah. So let's go to the money laundering now. No, I'm only joking.
Yeah, let's go to the money laundering.
Yeah. What did you learn? No, but to be fair, because it's complicated, it's not for us and for you, but give us a helicopter view of ForViva, and the different businesses within it and the size and scale of the sort of company.
Okay, so I suppose now turnover of the organisation is in the region of £180 million. We have over 2,000 staff at any one point. It operates in terms of social housing and housing, our asset-based organisation that operates purely within the Northwest, but the contracting business operates nationally. As I said, there are synergies and there are benefits between the two. The ownership structure is different. Yeah. We benefit as an organisation, as For Housing benefits from a significant VAT saving because effectively Liberty is owned by us, so delivers. But we also then benefit from the profit that is brought in through the commercial organisation. So I suppose if you were looking at what ForViva is, it's ultimately it's about social good. It's about doing good. Yeah. It's an organisation that the vision is about improved lives. And what we wanted to do, we operate with a commercial head and a social heart. So although there's a commercial focus, the money comes into the organisation to provide employment opportunities, to invest in some of the technologies around decarbonisation, to invest in new homes for homelessness like the For Futures, because we can't continue, as we made the decision a number of years ago, to rely on social rent to meet the challenges facing the future. So we had to do something different. Not everyone gets it, not everyone likes it, but the reality is that it's a board-driven organisation that has really strong values and a really strong purpose.
Yeah, I see that. And not everybody likes it. It's the way the world, I think you were trailblazers in this world in terms of we're going to have to find extra revenue from somewhere if we're going to tackle the housing crisis from a new build perspective, the homelessness crisis that we've got, especially in Manchester, and we're going to deal with this decarbonisation agenda. You can't do all those things with social rent alone. Yeah,
you can't. I wish we'd have been a little bit less trailblazing. I've got to be hindsight. If I've learned anything, hindsight is a wonderful thing. And just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean to say you should. And I just think we'd have taken a little bit slower, a little bit more of a considered view. Yeah. But ultimately, having faced some of the challenges that we've faced, we are in a very strong, we're in a good place. Good. We are delivering. We've got a very strong business plan. We've got a great culture in the organisation. Our biggest assets are our staff and our tenants. Yeah. And we deliver. We deliver social good, and people will look and think, "Oh, that's a bit glib," but we do an incredible amount in the communities in which we work that are over and above just being a landlord.
Yeah, of course.
And we're not an organisation. For Housing isn't an organisation that wants to get its badge on everything. I put my ego away a long time ago when I became chief exec and got smacked down very early doors. My ego went. And we're not an organisation that is about badges and winning awards. It's about delivering quietly, getting on with it, and let the naysayers nay. And as people, and we just get hired and we just deliver.
Yeah. I like that. And what, I suppose since you've been in the organisation, Director of Asset Management, is that where you started?
Yeah.
What's changed for you in that period? And I mean, not just with the business, but in housing generally, what's been the big changes that you've seen in that period?
Oh, big changes. I've seen so many, you know, because it's like up there, you know, we've had the drive. When I first came into general needs social housing. So when I first came in, everything was about, certainly for the LSVTs, it was about delivering decent homes. So it was very much about the assets, delivering decent homes at all costs, because you had to meet that target. Some met it well, some met it not so well. And some of the damp and mold problems we have now is because a considered approach wasn't taken to asset management when some of those programs were delivered. Then we had the TSA. So we had a sector that was around, you know, it was all about the tenants. And I don't know if you remember, if you had any recollection of the sector at the time, the pink bus that went round, and it was all about, we're going to talk to tenants, and this was all going to be about tenants. Yeah. And then that seemed to move, that moved on, obviously changing government. The TSA to something was disbanded. And then we moved to a drive of organisations need to sweat their assets. They need to be more commercial because of the financial challenges that are going to be faced. And we took on that mantle. That's where we decided, actually, okay, we do need to, because, you know, 2012, we were in Inside Housing, and Inside Housing did a survey. And I think at the time we were at the top of the list. That they produced a number of, Inside Housing loved to produce charts around who's the highest and who's the lowest. And we were the highest in terms of our dependency upon benefit upon our social housing income. And that's a risk for any organisation, to have one income stream that they are totally dependent on. Now, that came to fruition in 2015 when you had the rent cut. And suddenly, you know, millions of pounds were taken out of housing associations' business plans because our rents were just overnight. CPI +1 just went for 4 years. And we had some real challenges, but we've made some changes in the organisation that meant we were well placed to meet those challenges. So we had that drive towards commercial and growth and doing things differently. And then I suppose things changed because there was some, you know, there were some shockers out there, you know, in terms of things like Cosmo and how did that happen, and then obviously I think the worst of all was Grenfell. It was a bit of a wake up to us all. You know, we get, maybe as a sector we were focusing too much of our time on the new developments and the sexy new things and actually maybe as we'd lost sight of what we were here to do. Which is, you know, existing beneficiaries, existing assets, giving people what I had.
Yeah, absolutely.
A good, clean, healthy home to live in. And then COVID brought that home even more, because I always knew that we had a lot of need within our general needs stock. So, you know, we've got our supported housing, but I don't think until COVID we fully realised the extent of the poverty and the need and the mental health need and the underlying health problems that people face, and the barriers that people face within the communities in which we work. And that COVID brought that home to me, you know, the food banks and, you know, the level of poverty. We've got kids who are malnourished. It's 21st century.
I know.
You know, we're in Salford, we're in Stockbridge Village, we're in Oldham, and we're in Cheshire, Western Cheshire. And we've got, you know, so we're only ever 10 minutes away from a multi-million-pound house, you know, and a posh restaurant. And yet we've got kids who are malnourished.
It's mad, isn't it? To think that is insane.
It is crazy. So we've focused our attention. I mean, we've always been customer focused, and I hopefully have delivered the right services. But what we want to do is be more local based now, less centralization, less big office, and people come to us, and more being out in the community and being more local based.
Yeah. And what have you seen during COVID in terms of how the customers have reacted to that, and how has your team adapted their style to accommodate that? Because it's so different. I remember, you know, I went to meet a housing association the other day. It was still working in quite a traditional way. Tenants coming into the property and they were delivering the service that way. And it feels like we've moved on from that a little bit now, to be honest. And I think, yes, you're going to have to offer both, but clearly, how has your team adapted to deliver great customer service? In some cases, when we're in lockdowns, remotely.
Yeah,
People.
it's been difficult for tenants. Tenants have been incredibly resilient and also realistic. But during COVID, they realised that there were just some things we just couldn't do. And that they couldn't come into the offices, or if they did absolutely need to, they'd have to make an appointment to come in, so we didn't have that walk in. But incredibly understanding, you know, understanding about the services that we could provide, understanding about the response times to repairs. So, you know, all round, staff incredibly understanding, staff again resilient, but incredibly flexible. You know, staff put themselves at risk.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
some of our frontline staff, they turned up, they delivered the services. You know, we look back and, you know, and are we out of COVID? I don't know, but we feel in a lot better place than where we were this time, you know, 18 months ago. And staff were incredibly committed to delivering services to tenants, particularly in our extra care, particularly in our supported housing.
And they didn't actually know the risks. So that makes them the heroes for me, because they didn't actually know the risk at one point. We didn't have a clue.
No, and so they were going in to support people, but also they were not only supporting people physically, they were supporting people mentally. You know, you had people who were in extra care and supported housing who could not go out for months on end, who saw no one for months on end. And they were there, they were, you know, they were so innovative. You know, balcony bingo, you know, sing-along sessions, and they did everything to try to be as inclusive as they possibly could. So staff care, you know, I think the vast majority of the staff who work in this organisation and who work in housing want to make a difference, and they care. They truly give a stuff, and they go all out. And our staff, no different, I'm sure, to a lot of housing associations, have been incredibly flexible, incredibly resilient.
Yeah, for sure. And what's changed for you personally? Not in COVID, but if we go back, you know, started at the business in asset management, obviously transitioned into chief exec. In that time, awarded an MBE. Must have been a very proud moment in terms of that situation. I actually, when I was doing my research, found a picture. I was like, here we are.
Oh yeah, I can't remember what colour hair. I remember when I got the. I was in the office at Regent Street, and one of my the PA handed over a letter, and she said, you might want to look at this. And I opened it up, and I've got to be honest, I thought it was a wind up. I genuinely, well, yeah, because I'm a cynical scouser, aren't I? So I just thought someone was taking the Michael. And I can remember seeing this letter signed by, I am man, mom, your obedient servant. And I'm thinking, someone's taking the piss here.
Yeah.
And his name was Richard Tilbury. And I thought, no, this has got to be a wind up.
Yeah.
And it says in the letter that you have to not tell anyone, because it will be announced in, I don't know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks time and whatever. But I actually had a member of staff at the time called Matt Jones. And Matt Jones's wife had been about 6 months earlier, had been awarded an OBE, I think it was. And he was in the office, and I went into the office and said, Matt, don't say anything. I said, but just look at this. Does this look kosher to you? Does this look genuine? And he went, oh my God, that looks just like Rebecca's. And I went, oh my God, my father had turned in his grave because my father was anti-royalist and ragged trousers. But then I thought, and unfortunately my mother had passed away, but my mother would have been made up. And there was, you know, when it all settled down, I felt incredibly proud. You know, my dad have been alive, would I have accepted it? Would he have allowed me to have accepted it? It would have been a very challenging. My dad, it would have been an incredibly challenging discussion with my dad, because I was 19 before I realised that the Queen gave a speech on Christmas Day at 3 o'clock.
Oh, right.
Because he was, you know, Michael Foot, Arthur Scargill, all in one. So he would have really struggled with it.
Yeah.
My mother would have loved it.
Yeah,
going to
because
Buckingham Palace
oh,
and all of that
imagine
pomp and circumstance.
I know, and I saw the picture of it, and I thought to myself, because like whenever I speak to you, sometimes I feel like you can be sometimes quite hard on yourself around that. Like, oh, we do our best, and I think you do more than your best, I must say, and I think that's rewarded by the MBE. But also, you've not exactly put your feet up since that either, have you?
No, God, no. There's been no days on the golf course or any of that lark. I'll tell you that. But getting the MBE was amazing, and that was for charity work. And it was for getting people into jobs. So that was I was incredible. So that's making a difference. That's truly, I was, helped to get around 500 people into apprenticeships over a particular period of time. And that for me, that makes me, those people don't know my name. They don't even know I exist.
Yeah.
But that's okay. But they got into jobs because of, some things that I was able to influence. And that's the reason why sometimes you get up of a morning, the new extra cares that we've built, the investment that we put into our high rise. The people who live there don't know who I am. They don't care who I am. But actually, it's really nice to know that people live safer in their homes because we made a decision, or I was able to influence us putting sprinklers into the high rise. We were one of the first RPs to put sprinklers in.
Right.
And why were we able to do that? We were able to do that because we had some spare capacity in our business plan, because we had profit coming in from some of our commercial activities. And we build the Four Futures schemes. The model of the Four Futures is, everyone needs a home, everyone needs a base, they need an address. And the best way to prevent homelessness is to give people somewhere to live. But then what you have to do is also support them to live in the property. And we developed on our garage site some small apartments. They're not the biggest. They're 1-bedroom studio apartments, but they've got, the open plan kitchen. They've got, their shower rooms, bedroom. They get their heating, their water, their electricity. They get their broadband, all for, I think it's £67 a week. 2-year tenancy. But what we do is we then work with them. They again get a support around them to help them with tenancy sustainment, to help them with getting a job, getting a new tenancy, and again, we were able to subsidize that and build those homes for people. And it's interesting, 60% of the people who live in those are under 30, and they were at risk of being homeless. So if we hadn't built that, 20 more kids on the street, and the vast majority of people who end up on the streets are care leavers. They leave some form of care and have got nowhere to go.
We're probably going to bounce around, but you've picked up on homelessness. It's something really that I'm massively passionate about, but I honestly don't know how to help. And I mean that because I live and work in Manchester city centre. I'm seeing the problem get worse, not better, but I feel like there's more awareness to the problem of homelessness, and the work that we've done with the Boo Centre and other charities feels like you just can't do enough. And what can we do as a community, as a housing industry, to get people off the streets? And the second part of that is, do they want to get off the streets? Because in some cases, the people I've met in the Boo Centre actually want to be on the streets, which feels like we've done something in the past there for that to be a case.
Yeah, it's so difficult. I mean, first and foremost, people need a home. That's they need a home. They need to be able to go in. They need to have 4 walls. They need to feel warm. They need to feel safe. The people that you see on the streets, rough sleepers, as they're called, the tip of the iceberg. Sofa surfers. There's so many young people who sofa surf who are, and so many people who are in temporary accommodation. Do people that you see in the city centre, do they want to be there? I don't believe anyone wants to sit in Deansgate asking for money and possibly not having showered for a couple of days. I don't believe that's a want. I believe that what's happened is that's a reality for them. They have entered, that's their community. Because what you've got to remember is that's where their friends, that they want to have a drink, they want to, they want to be with their friends, and their friends live in that area.
Yeah.
And also what you've got to remember is, if you're homeless, where do you go and shower? Where do you go to the toilet? You've got, if you're in the city centre, you've got access to things. You've got access to public toilets.
Yeah, of course.
You've got access to a sink where at least you can dab yourself down. So, but for me, it's a problem that is it's a wicked problem. There isn't one simple solution. There is, dependency issues, mental health issues. The mental health services, they're not failing. They are under-resourced.
Agree.
There's so much need now. There's so much need to support people with their mental health, with their dependency. I do think, there used to be things called hostels. They weren't always the best, but people had somewhere to go to get some help, to get some medical attention. There used to be wet access hostels, dry access hostels.
Yeah.
But we see less of them and less of them. And when they are there, they're not in city centres.
Is that because of, I've done a lot of work on this, but gentrification and the fact that we're starting to redevelop buildings that are disused now. So clearly there's less places to put hostels. But the thing that I think you nailed, and the best point for me is around, it's not about providing a home. Everyone needs a home, fact. Yeah. It's the support beyond that, because clearly people don't know how to live in a home. And it's like, I came out of the army when I was younger, and I really struggled with civvy life after a couple of years of doing it, because you just get indoctrinated in that culture. And I imagine it's the same with homelessness, in the fact that once you've been on the street, like you say, you build a community, friends, a network of people, and you've got to break that cycle, haven't you, somehow?
Yeah, you've got to break that cycle, but also you mightn't have paid a bill. If you've come out of the army, or you've come out of, care, you've had things done for you.
Yeah.
And you haven't had to had those life skills. I think we fail in society at school. We don't teach people at school life skills. Yeah. We teach kids Pythagoras theorem.
Algebra.
And when's the last time you used Pythagoras theorem for anything? Or Archimedes' screw, or binary code? Yeah. But actually, we don't teach people what's a mortgage, what's APR, what's your how do you calculate your annual percentage rate? What's it costing you to get into credit? What's a tenancy? We don't treat people, we don't give kids, some of those basic skills that will enable them in adult life to actually meet some of the challenges of being an adult.
It's a tough one, isn't it? What any more that we could do as a collective, or any more that you will try and do to, because you've been a massive champion in this area, but what else could people do as an individual, as a company? What can we do to try and bridge the gap?
We saw throughout the pandemic with everyone in the coming together, housing associations came together. Housing associations and local authorities came together. All the agencies came together to get people a roof over the head, and they worked. And we broke some rules, and we knocked down the walls of bureaucracy, and we got people in, and we were able to support them. So why can't we do that all the time?
Well, hotels opened the doors, didn't they? I mean, like there was a bed for everyone. And
why can't we have that attitude? Why does it take a global pandemic for us to show that the problem can be solved?
Yeah.
But it takes a bit of ingenuity, commitment, takes compassion. Yeah. And just breaking down some of the nonsense bureaucracy we have in this country about getting people into a home, particularly a home with a social rent. We make it so difficult for people. If you're not digitally enabled, if you're not literate, if you're not in full capacity, getting onto, allocation systems, that are necessary evil, but God, it's so hard for people. So hard for people.
And how much is the housing crisis impacting on that, in terms of all this new development happening at the moment? And I feel like the homelessness piece linked to that is a bit of a moot point, actually, because everyone needs a home and we need to create more housing. Feels to me like a lot of the new housing is private sale, and how much are we doing to plug the gap in terms of social rent and social housing?
it's outright, there's a lot of outright market sale because the market's buoyant. There's a lot of PRS, and we've got one of the largest PRS developments in the UK at the moment.
Right, wow.
Over at Dock 5. But the money that we make on that goes to support social housing, and it goes into supporting the development of social housing. We've committed to building more social housing within the Northwest.
Yeah.
We've committed to building more of the For Future schemes, which is subsidised rent. And we need more social housing, but building more social housing, not just building social housing, creating more social housing is key. It's not the only solution, but it's a big part of the solution. Yeah. And when I say create, and this links in, I suppose, to the decarbonisation, it's like I'll segue from one to the other. Yeah. But if you look at, I believe that we should create more social housing, not necessarily build more social housing, because we've got a number of properties, commercial proprities, we've got properties that are empty that we need to repurpose, we need to regenerate, because to just build also has a negative carbon impact because of the embodied carbon it takes to create bricks and cement and concrete, and all of that creates carbon emissions. Whereas actually, if you've already got a big property that's built, refurb it, don't knock it down, don't go and build over it. Actually, what can you do to create more social housing? And that's one of the challenges that we're looking at the moment. Right. It's not just about building new, it's about actually what properties can we buy up and can we renovate?
Yeah, it's going to have to happen, because for me, the carbon neutral and the decarbonisation agenda is interesting because it depends how you look at it. For me, a lot of people are going, well, yeah, we build and then we offset it by planting trees. I think we need to offset it, and I think we need to look at it in a different way. If we need to reduce our carbon footprint, like not just plant a couple of trees in Edinburgh and all of our carbon neutrals that's gone away.
No, we've got to look at all our operations. We've got to look, but it's hard at the moment. I mean,
it is.
The cost of putting in something like an air source is restrictive, not only restrictive as in the financial costs, but also the space costs. There are some properties, particularly in social housing stock, that are just will not be able to achieve net zero. And so we've got to consider, how do we offset those? What can we do in those properties to get them to as near to net zero as possible? But some you're just not going to be able to put air source, because it's not just the air source heat pump, it's the water tank and that cylinder that goes with it. But the reality is that we've got to be active. We can't just keep putting it off and going, oh, well, we'll wait until there's new technology, or we'll wait until the government suddenly gives us billions of pounds, because it's not going to happen. No. We've got to look at ourselves and start. But the one thing I can guarantee you is I'm not going to be the trailblazer that starts.
I don't think anyone wants to be honest. I had Alex Wiley, who's the Director of Sustainability from Clarion on, and obviously their problem is times 125,000 properties. I mean,
Jesus.
You look at that and think, wow. What's been the impact to ForViva or for housing? I presume more impacted, but what's been their impact in terms of what's it going to cost you? How long is it going to take you? And is it possible to get all your houses to, is it efficiency band C? I mean, is it possible?
We're committed. I mean, we're I suppose fortunate because we were an LSVT, so we invested quite heavily within all our stock, within Salford particularly. Okay. And so we achieved on a significant number of our properties band C a while ago, but we still have just under 2,000 homes out of the 18,500 homes that we own that are at band D. So we need to get those band D to band C. Now, we've committed with our business plan that we will do that by 2030, and that will be through EWI. That will be through external, insulate.
Yeah, absolutely.
There will be some air source. We've put ground source and biomass in some properties, but what we're doing at the moment, we're trying to use a data-led approach and a tenant-led approach. So we're working with the Net Zero Collective, and we've put monitors into, I think it's about 60 properties at this moment in time, which we're going to monitor them over a 12-month period. And from that data that will come from that monitoring, we'll then plan on the basis of those archetypes, what are the best interventions, the best combination of interventions for that property to achieve net zero. Because there's no two properties that are the same. They might have the same archetypes, but it's also about the way people live in them as well. And that's the bit that gets lost in all of the conversations sometimes around decarbonisation. We get caught up with the technology and the type of building, and we get caught up with how difficult it is. But actually, there are two things that we should keep at the forefront of everything, is that these are people's homes. And we need to be engaging and working with people now so that they are familiar with and aware of the changes that are going to have to be made to their homes. Not 6 weeks before you're about to go and do something. They need to be part of the journey and part of the planning of the work that's going to go in their homes. And that might be in 5 or 10 years' time, but they need to do that. We need to be doing that now. And you know, for me, it's really, really, really important that we engage tenants, that we make sure that tenants are absolutely critical. And then the other thing that the decarbonisation is the great opportunity. The great opportunity is to create high-paid jobs, to create skilled jobs that people can get into, retrofit assessors, retrofit coordinators. You know, there's some really fabulous opportunities. You know, Andy Burnham set up a retrofit task force, and you know that it's really interesting that, you know, he gets, and the team over at the GMCA get the opportunities that can be created through the decarbonisation. For us, I see the opportunities, but in terms of, you know, your question was, what will that mean? What will it cost you? For my organisation, 18,500 homes to achieve net zero, and we're in a good position.
Yeah, you are.
We're looking at £180 million. If you look, I lead the decarbonisation agenda for Greater Manchester housing providers, and that's a collective of 25 RPs in Greater Manchester. For them to achieve net zero by 2050, you're looking at £4.4 billion. Pounds. That's 250,000 homes. So you then think of the homes that are in the UK, social housing homes, you start to see the size and the scale.
Oh, it's massive. I read something that is it £1 trillion it's going to cost to actually get to net zero carbon, which is hundreds of millions. Yeah, it's just an insane amount. We haven't got that amount of money, but and on the decarbonisation thing, for me, it links quite nice to this, to how do we inspire the next generation of talent? Well, the next generation of talent are talking about green agendas. How do we get the world a better place? How do we make it more sustainable? And actually, I think it's going to lend itself quite nicely, because the biggest decarbonisation target's got to be on housing stock, hasn't it, really? I mean, it's got to be.
Housing, I mean, transport's the biggest, isn't it, in terms of its impact on the environment, but housing's a significant one. And I think, you know, social housing should be used as the model at how we achieve net zero, because we can work as RPs, we can work collaboratively, we can work together to come up with the solution that means the private sector can then learn and benefit from it. We can attract the supply chain into the UK. We can attract the supply chain into Greater Manchester, I believe. And that means if you then attract the supply chain and you then have the skills to be able to install some of this technology, you'll then drive the price down, which then means that the private sector will start coming into it. So there's a piece there about thinking, again, as I said earlier, there's lots that we can learn from the Decent Homes programs that were done a number of years ago. And the organisations need to be collaborating more. We need to come together. This isn't a For Housing problem or a Salix problem or a Clarion problem. This isn't a Greater Manchester problem or an English problem or a British problem or Scottish problem. It's a world problem.
Yeah, agree, totally.
And the people who, you know, I look at what I do, because I'm a bit of an environmental, you know, champion, I suppose. And why am I? Because I look at the mess we've made of it, and I look at my daughter and my, you know, the children my daughter will have. And I'd like there to be a world that still exists for them.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely, 100%, and that's got to be on everyone's minds at the moment. And the one thing, you're really good at segueing these things. You're doing my job for me. But the one thing I've noticed that you do really well is you obviously have got a great office. I've been to the office previously, but COVID has accelerated probably something that I know you were quite passionate about before COVID, which is agile working, work from wherever, this flexible working piece, which clearly is another thing that brings our carbon footprint right down for many reasons. But what have you learned from that process? So, like, I know what have you done so far from a remote working perspective? Is everyone working remotely? Have you got some of your team? What have you agreed internally?
Yeah, well, people are working in any way they want to work that ensures that they're achieving the customer outcomes that we need and that works for them. So we're very clear that if you are achieving the customer outcomes, you're delivering great customer service, you've got the flexibility and agility and empowerment to work when and where works best for you. So we have some of our offices are still closed. All of our offices that are open are still appointment based only. And that means for staff and tenants.
Okay.
Staff can choose to come into the office if they want, or they can work agilely. They can work from a pod, they can work from another office. We've partnered up with some organizations so that our staff can go in there and work remotely. All our staff are equipped to work remotely. They've all got the IT kit. We make sure that we work with the teams, we talk to the teams, and they come up with the best way for them to work. If the way a finance team and the way they want to work will be different to the way the neighborhood management team works, to the way the IT team works, or the marketing and comms team works. So they need to come up with their own model. Yeah. Because I'm not going to dictate to people, oh, okay, it's a really great idea. Well, what we'll all do, you all have to come into the office at least 3 days a week, or you all have to come into the office at least 2 days a week. Why?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why? If you are delivering the organizational objectives and you're delivering your job, but you're doing that from a variety, you're doing that from working from home, working remotely, working it from your car because you've gone to pick the kids up and and you're sitting there in the car park waiting for them and you're having a quick 10-minute chat with your line manager over the phone. That's working.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it is working. And how have you set that out from a comms perspective? Because I love your view on this. Everyone's different. I think some people went quite early, blanket, everyone works from home, we'll never let anyone in the offices. Yeah. I think as the time's spun on a little bit and COVID's disappearing slightly, I'm not saying we're through it yet, but I do think people are like making their own choices. And so that's really good. But how do you communicate that messaging to say, look, we're all on output here. We're not on presenteeism and you being in the office and so we can see you.
Yeah. Or me tipping up the office. Because you know what will happen if I tip up the office and say I'm in the office every Wednesday? Then there'll be 100 people who are in the office every Wednesday because everyone wants to be in the C-suite, don't they? How do you communicate it? I communicate regularly with the staff, and I say I wanted staff to have a direct line. I wanted them to hear it from me, because if they don't hear it very clearly and very directly, they don't believe it. And then and when that happens, grayness is created. So we have a webinar, I think that they're every 2 months, in which staff come along, they can ask me any questions, anything. And I'll talk to them, and that's where we've worked with them and listened to them to come up with the way in which we work now. And they hear it from me. So there's no grayness around it. So I can remember on a webinar a number of months ago, and this is when we were in the depths of COVID. I heard the fear in somebody that they were frightened about having to come back into the office. Right. And there were a number of people who were frightened because they were shielding people or they were just scared. And so for them to hear from me, you don't have to continue to work from home. You don't have to. It has a massive impact on them. It put them at ease. And we've invested a lot in people's mental health, in creating virtual social environments, and staff can come into the office and meet as teams now. We encourage that because you know, I met with the board yesterday, the chairs, the new chairs, and we met in person because, you know, you're never going to replace all the time that meeting of people and being together. As human beings, we're social animals, but it's not all the time. You don't have to do it.
No, of course. Yeah, and we got really complacent back in. I remember talking to someone the other day, and in the role I do, meeting people and driving 2 hours to a service station to meet someone for half an hour to drive back. It's like nuts. Can't believe that ever happened.
but we did it, and actually it felt perfectly normal at the time.
I know.
Whereas now you just think, why would I do that? Why would I drive all of that way to actually have to? No, I've gone to London. I've gone to London. I've got up in the morning, gone to London to have an hour's meeting with solicitors,
and then come back.
And to go back. Whereas now you just do it over. It just doesn't make any sense anymore.
It is. And one thing I read when I was looking through all the articles that you've ever been in inside housing was about this. You're an advocate of flexibility and working to live. This is well before anything happened in this world. So it's funny when these things come to roost, but you really are an advocate, aren't you, that people come to work to live and to have a good life, and it's all about sort of them having a real balance. Where's that come from? Where does that drive from for you?
I suppose life. You know, the people talk a lot about lived experience. You know, and it's also about, you know, I treat people the way I would like people to treat me, with respect. And I look at people and I think it's really unhealthy that, you know, when I see people who go into the office at 7 o'clock in the morning and they're home at 7 o'clock in the evening, 8 o'clock in the evening, or that, you know, they're on their emails at 10 o'clock at night, and, you know, everything is about work. And, you know, there's no one who's on the deathbed saying, I wish I spent more time in the office, or I wish I'd spent more time with work. Actually, what do you crave? You crave your family, you crave your friends. And if staff can get that balance right, if you can get that balance right, I think that's where you get high performing organizations.
Great.
And if I look at last year's performance in For Housing, we had one of our best performing years.
Wow.
People were working from home, and yet we had one of our best performing years. You know, so, and it's up to other organizations what they do, whether they tell people to come back into the office. We're all different. We all believe that, you know, that there's varying ways of work. I just want to give my staff as much flexibility and agility and as much empowerment as possible, so that they can go and do great job, great work for tenants ultimately.
Amazing. And a couple of last things. You mentioned that you met your board yesterday, which was one of the questions that I'd written out, was just, you've done a lot of work and there's been a communication out a couple of weeks ago around reorg of sort of your external board, because Andy Zuntz was coming to the end of his tenure. Just talk us through that. Like, what was your motivation for that, in terms of, you've really added some really innovative skills to the board, defo, and you've also done it with a real great diversity and inclusion at the heart of what you've done, in my opinion. Yeah. What was your thoughts when you did it? Because you've added skills that you've not had before on that board. Yeah.
There was a driver, because obviously we had some regulatory challenges, and there was some feeling that actually we needed to strengthen the board. And we undertook a whole organisational strategic business review that involved the board, that was board led, and our board was a strong board, but we needed different skills. We had too many of the same type of skills, and we had too many of the same type of people, and that's not good. So we needed to diversify our skills base, and we needed to diversify the people that were on the board. So we went through quite a long process, but we identified some of the skills that we needed. And I thought, well, I've got once in a lifetime opportunity here, not only to diversify the skills, but to actually get some more inclusivity on the board, so that you're hearing different people's different perspective, different life perspective. And obviously we worked with you guys, we worked with staff. When we were recruiting the chair, we made sure that we had a gender balanced panel. We made sure that we had one of our BAME leaders in the interviews. We made sure that we asked really challenging questions around bias, unconscious bias and around EDI issues. So it wasn't just your typical one question, you know, oh, well, we've asked that, we've ticked that box. And successfully, I think we've got, you know, I look at the board that we have now at For Housing, and we've got a incredibly strong board now.
Agreed.
And we had a strong board, we've got incredibly now, you know, Paul Kennedy is going to be the chair, you know, chief executive of what was procurement for housing, knows the housing sector inside out, but again has been a successful entrepreneur, but is absolutely embedded in social housing because of his lived experience. Then you've got Mark Fletcher, you know, chief executive of Manchester Pride. You know, the fact that these people applied for these, you know, said an awful lot about the brand of our organisation.
Absolutely, it does.
What we were doing. Deborah McLaughlin, you know, Deborah McLaughlin, ex-regional director of Homes England, you know, brings to us a tremendous, she's a commissioner now over in Liverpool, brings a tremendous amount of experience around development, but actually also totally committed to public service, totally committed to the social housing sector and to getting value for money for tenants. So phenomenal. And then Graham Foster, you know, Graham Foster, ex-regulator, fabulous, because again, we get that. It's so important we get our governance right. But he's also a CEO of a social housing organisation, which means that he knows the challenges of being the regulator, but he also knows the challenges of being regulated. So you started off with one schizophrenic, and that's me, and maybe we'll end up on another one with Graham. But Graham brings a tremendous amount of experience as well, and that coupled with, you know, the other people, you know, we've got Steve Bentley on the board, who was from Barclays and you know, knows the sectors inside out. Jim Barclay, you know, he's from sort of Mersey Travel, being a chief executive and an FD, and brings a tremendous amount of experience. And then we have the lived experience of, you know, of Christine Barker and Lawrence McIntosh. So, and the development and asset management experience of Paul Butterworth. So phenomenal board.
And it was refreshing. I mean, we worked together on it, and it was refreshing just in terms of sometimes, and you know this as well as I do, and I'm not saying it's our sector, it's the world we live in. People sometimes add one question to their interview panel and go, right, we've covered off diversity and inclusion now, we've done our bit.
Yeah.
There was a real appetite, and the whole process was inclusive, the whole process was diverse, and actually we got the result we wanted, but we got the result we wanted naturally. So actually people applied. I didn't actually have to do anything other than advertise the roles, and the people came. And what I would say is that because every part of the process felt like we'd tackled diversity and inclusion. And I suppose the place I wanted to end on that is you've been a huge champion of diversity and inclusion over the years. You do loads of work outside of ForViva. Are you liking what you see at the moment? I mean, there's people really putting a focus on it. For me, I hope it's, and I think it's genuine, and I hope that continues. What more can we do? Where are we heading? What's your view on it all?
Yeah, I think in the social housing sector, I think we're doing a lot, and the work of the National Housing Federation, I mean, they've just published their data tool, and to which they got over 80% engagement from the social housing sector. So it just shows you how at the forefront of people's thinking in the social housing sector it is. Obviously, you know, with events like George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, you know, that's had a massive impact with Black Lives Matter and really looking at lived experience of people. Is it as good as it should be? No. I always regale the story. You know, I've worked in some of the most undiverse places in the world, Australia for one, but I worked for the police, which wasn't as diverse then as it should have been. And, you know, I've worked in construction. I've been the only woman in meetings, and, you know, and you can imagine the sort of comms and the communications and the things that I have seen. Do I think all that's gone? No. You know, you're looking now about, you know, what's happening with women, and, you know, women having to fight to be respected and to feel safe in society. And I think there's a mass society that there's still an awful lot of work to do. I think, sadly enough, I think some of the discrimination has just gone underground, and it's gone more subtle, but it's a lot better than it was. It's not as good as it will be in the future. But as long as organisations and sectors like the social housing sector and organisations like For Housing take it seriously and are committed to changing it in incremental steps, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah, love that. And you ooze the leadership and the capability to be a figurehead, especially for social housing, but wider than that in terms of actually making this change. Because for me, I don't like this spotlight management of situations. So one thing happens and then there's a reaction, and then it's, because I agree with you, I think other discrimination just went under the radar because everyone started focusing on, right, let's do BAME, talent and acquisition, and well, what about all of the other things that are going on? And, you know, and they lose focus then. And but I think it's a really nice way to end.
Interesting one. How do you motivate a young white heterosexual male? There's an interesting one, isn't it? You know, how do you motivate them? How do you because there's talent, we have to be inclusive. And by being inclusive, you can't be exclusive. You can't exclude. And so that's my worry, that, you know, it's inclusivity for all, not just particular groups. Yeah,
I agree. I totally agree. And as we wrap up, I mean, I honestly think I could talk to you for 3 or 4 hours, but I mean, I've got loads more stuff, but we're just never going to cover it.
You'd have to buy me a gin and tonic for that now.
Final thing on future for ForViva as we close. What's coming up? What are you excited about? What's happening in the next sort of 2-3 years that you're going to be really looking forward to achieving?
We've got our new development program. We're out refinancing at the moment. We've got our new development program, so I'm excited about that. We will be delivering more social homes. We will be delivering more market rent and some outright market sales. So we'll do a number of tenures. I'm really excited about the challenges of decarbonisation. I want to make a difference. I want to make a difference in Greater Manchester. I want to work collaboratively with other RPs to really grab hold of this and do something and to make a difference. In terms of for what I see for housing and for Viva in the next 5 years, success. We will become even more customer focused. We will have a strong business plan that will enable us to meet the challenges of the future, but we'll never lose sight of the knitting again. And we'll never lose sight of what's important, and that's our existing customers in existing homes, and that's where we'll focus our attention, not on all the sexy stuff.
What a lovely way to finish. Thank you very much for your time. I'm sure people are going to get so much value out of this episode, and I'm sure we'll get you back on in the future and see how you track against that plan.
Hope so. Thanks, James.
See you later.
Take care. Bye-bye.